This session is monitoring the PMO. My name is Michael Wharton. I'm an MVP. I've got 10 years experience in this space. It's a very exciting part of my life and working in the PMO. You guys are going to see a lot of great sessions, but there's only two words I want you to remember today, and that's monitor the PMO. It's a critical part of having a successful PMO implementation. I have worked with companies that have planned and planned and planned for years, and nothing seems to go until they start monitoring the PMO. And I've worked with companies, they just throw it out there, no planning, but they start monitoring the PMO, and it works in either case. Because when you monitor the PMO, people know that something's happening. The wheels are turning. And we're going to talk about this and what I mean by it. Basically, this is an overview of what we're going to be talking about. So before I get started, how many of you have your PMP? Just a show of hands. So a lot of this stuff is going to be new. How many of you are a PMO staff, a director or an executive? I think you're going to love this session because this is going to really help you with your PMO and implementation of Project Server. How many of y'all are technical? That's good too, because a lot of the stuff I'm showing you, it won't be technical, but you'll know how to implement it after we go over this. So just to give you a little bit of history and where I kind of really fell into this, companies over the years have asked me to come in and help with the PMO, mostly as a coach. And during this coaching process of working with the project managers or the team members, what I discovered is a lot of things weren't happening. So I was constantly fighting or looking for why isn't this timesheet in? Or why isn't this project being updated? So I'd go to someone's desk and look at it, and then after 30 minutes, I'd find out why. But over time, I started going, if I could create some views or create some processes, maybe I can be proactive in finding out how to make this run smoother. So over time, I've worked with the PMO, built these views, these schedules, these various tools to help figure out what's going on. Also, the PMO, it's all about communicating. Being a focal point, people need to know, why this PMO is so important. People are sensitive. If they're not sending in timesheets, or let's say they are sending in timesheets, and then they stop and nobody says anything, they feel like nobody cares. So it's important to remind people to get those timesheets in or those task sheets. Even the project managers are sensitive. If you're not looking at their schedules or looking for things, they just don't think anybody really cares. And then 6 months comes down the road and you go, you haven't been updating your schedule. Well, nobody's been asking me to update the schedule. So it's important to get these wheels going. Most of your PMPs, you understand this. These are the 5 process groups. In a good way of managing projects, and this is for a project, you have the initiation phase, you do planning, execution, and then you have the monitoring. You have to do monitoring within a project. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the PMO monitoring all the projects. And so this is my definition of PMO monitoring. And it's basically monitoring all these things. You're monitoring the initiation stages. A lot of companies have more than one initiation stage. They have a proposal, and then do more planning, and then they do more planning, and then it becomes a project. And you have to manage and watch all these phases. With Project Server, you've got project schedules, but you've got resources and resource demand and resource utilization. You have to manage that, and we'll talk about that in some of my examples. You've got governance. Hopefully, you've defined some governance on what your standards are. Maybe you have a project template, and you have these phase gates in there. And a new project manager might go, I don't need those, and they delete them. But you got to watch out for that to make sure all your standards are being implemented. It's too much for one person to look at all the hundreds of rules to figure out what's missing. So you have to build processes and automate it to make it work better for you. I also put in there security. You need to make sure your security roles are set properly. You may have some administrators in there and then they leave, but you want to get rid of those roles if they leave into another department. So I kind of call myself the sheriff because I'm not shooting you with bullets. I'm going to be sending emails or notifications to remind you to do certain things. And we'll look at those reminders. How many of y'all have problems with accurate data? Okay. Oh, did I tell you I'm from North Carolina? Could anybody tell? And I have to warn you, I make up words sometimes. It's not even an accent. So if I make up a word, you might have to ask me to say it over again. Anyway, so timely and accurate data is real critical. There's a lot of those wheels that are turning in the PMO, and you have to manage that. Standards. We'll look at some standards. At the end, if we have time, I'm going to talk about the conformance index, how that can be a good standard for your PMO to make sure project managers are putting the right things in their schedule. All of this deals with really one thing. You want to ingrain good habits in your PMO. You can remind people over and over again to submit their timesheets or project managers to update their status. After you do this week after week, it becomes a habit. And that's what you want in your PMO. You just want a habit for these people in your group to do what they need to do. So basically a roadmap that I would follow, I would look at your pain points in the PMO of what's not happening. And I would probably focus on those as the first things to monitor in your PMO. We're going to talk about automation, but it's important to be able to do it manually. Somebody's got to have the task of looking at that. And once you've identified those things and do it manually, then we can look at how to automate it to make it more effective in your organization. And that's the second part, is building these processes. It's really notifications to tell people to do stuff. And I have different ways to make sure people get those things done. We'll also look at some dashboards that you can create to kind of encourage the executive sponsors that this is worthwhile, because they like to see that the money's well spent. And then once you do a few of these, you go back to the top and find some other pain points and try to automate that. Now, I've broken this down into really 3 categories. I've broken it down into project standards. These could be schedule standards. A lot of these standards are really based on Eric's book, good practice of a dynamic schedule and doing status updates and things of that sort. But there's also the project workspace. Many of you have documents that have to be signed and approved, and you want to make sure those things are that they are where they should be. One of the things that's really lacking in project is a snapshot of history. We'll talk about how you can take a snapshot. Some companies do it weekly, some do it monthly, and put it in a spreadsheet, but they have some kind of record of what the project looked like 6 weeks ago or 6 months ago. I've seen some tools from the vendors that do this, but if you don't have the money, there's a simple solution for that. And then there's the conformance index. How many of you are familiar with the conformance index? If you read the PMBOK, it's about 1 paragraph. And if you read the PMBOK project scheduler, they have a whole book on this, but I don't know if it really fits in. I mean, I read it and I keep looking at it, and I know a better way to do that. And then there's resource standards. Resources are a big part of it, making sure your generics make sense, And you don't have 5 generics like analysis and senior analysis or just all kind of analysis people, and people get confused on what they are. A summary of the vacations. Again, you could have a historical snapshot of the resources. I look at project and resources are really two separate systems, 2 sets of wheels that have to be managed and controlled. And then these seem like workflows, but they're not. These are these cycles that are within the project server. Now, every company implements project server differently. I've done over 25 implementations, and I've yet to find 2 that do it identical. There's one way that I think is the proper way, but then politics gets involved. And like timesheets, people say, we're not doing timesheets. That's fine. You don't have to do them. You're just not going to have as accurate data if you don't use timesheets. Anyway, we'll look at some of these cycles like the approval status. You send in time, then people approve it. You got to make sure those approvals are occurring. Making sure the project manager updates the status, pushes that unfinished work to the status date, all based on what I learned from Eric over here. So let's start and look at some simple and manual procedures for monitoring. I talked about the hit list. I create a weekly checklist of what I would go through each week in a PMO for monitoring it. So I just build that list, and it just it helps me each Monday to go through, and Tuesday. A lot of the tools can be just out of the box views. I'll show you some examples. But what I often do, I'll create a view called monitoring projects, and it's usually the custom fields that are optional that you need to make sure that data is being populated. Okay? Very manual. I look at it, I see a blank, I'll send an email to remind someone. You've gone from this phase gate to this phase gate, and in this phase gate, you're supposed to populate these fields. And if you don't, we're going to get inaccurate reports. But that's just creating a simple view within PWA. Same thing with resources. I throw up here delegation. When delegation first came out, that was a tool to make sure people submitted their timesheet for someone else. Kind of. I mean, that's what I heard at the beginning. That's the most important tool that I have for managing or monitoring. And what delegation does, it allows you to go in as another person. How many of y'all are familiar with delegation? And how many use it for monitoring? Okay, so some of you actually do that. That's good. But for the others, so what I do is I'll go in as a delegate. Maybe someone's been real commonly been delinquent on their timesheets. Or maybe they say they submitted them. I'll go in as a delegate and I'll be as them, and I can see if they submitted it. Maybe they did submit it. Maybe it's still in process. But it's a quick way to see what they're doing. And the same for project managers. I can go in as a project manager and make sure they've approved things. So it's kind of my creepy way of going in and seeing what's going on in the PMO. If you've got any questions, I'll answer them right away because I really want to be interactive, and we're almost done with our slides. No, I'm only kidding. But if you do have a question, bring it up. What's that? That's right, call on Eric. And then there's just simple reports. Excel spreadsheets are a great way to do reports and look for things. So let's look at one of the first things I do in monitoring. And this is so simple. I don't know if you recognize this, but this is under service settings is manage users. That one sheet tells me a ton of information. So I'll just look at it. You see that blank last login? What does that mean? It means many things. They haven't logged in. Maybe they don't know about logging in. Maybe they got 2 accounts and they're logging in another account. If you're doing a new implementation, like you're doing a pilot, I look at that and make sure the people in my pilot are actually logging in and doing something. That's if it's blank. Then if it's not blank, I look at the dates. In fact, I often will take I'll take that sheet and I'll put it in Excel and do some filtering. But then I'll look at the dates. Well, they haven't logged in 3 weeks. If you're trying to encourage a habit, you want them to log in at least every week and update what's going on. I want them to do it every day. That's my goal. But, some people, they just put 8888. They're working on the same thing every day. So that's not a big issue. But we want to make sure once a week they're submitting something. The other thing that last date tells me, if you're a project manager, I expect you to be in there at least once a week. And if I'm filtering by project managers and I'm not seeing you coming in each week, I see a problem. Not necessarily a bad problem. Maybe they need training, the project manager, or they don't know they're supposed to do this. But you can start encouraging them and finding out why they're not in there each week to update their project status. And then there's another thing I look at. I'm hoping the executive management's looking at this. I might look and see if they've logged in the past 2 or 3 months. They don't need to be in all the time, but it'd be nice if they looked at it sometimes. You're building it for them. I got feelings. I'll be hurt if you're not looking at this. The other thing is I get a little bit of missing data like this RBS. Somebody may be new. The RBS hasn't been created. So I now know I need to look at their profile. I need to talk to the HR people or the onboarding people to make sure those processes are in place for these new employees. Or maybe I see someone that's left the company, but they're still active. That one page tells me a lot. But that's a lot of work looking at that each week. So what I do, now we get into the automation. And most everyone in here has probably got a SQL guy that can write simple queries. That's a simple query. Have someone write a simple query, and in that query, I'm doing that same report. The only thing different in this query is now I can start filtering out stuff, so I don't have to look at so much. Like executive management, I might exclude them. In fact, I've created a is excluded. I put this special field in the resource profile called is excluded. And for those people that I don't really need to be telling them to enter the time, I'll just exclude them from that list. There's other flags I might put in there, but that's one of the most common ones that I've been using. I used to each week build that query and write these person's email address, exclude this email address, this, etc. Now that just resolves that. And then I've got other filters, But again, what I can do with these filters, I get a list, and like in this particular list, I can see the last connect is null. So they haven't logged in. And you know what else I got? I could probably modify this query and get their manager and maybe send them an email. Do you know anything about this person, or what's the story on them? And be proactive in getting them on board in the PMO. So over time, I build these queries, and I put them in a spreadsheet. And now I've got one. You remember that checklist? Now I got a spreadsheet with tabs, and on each tab, I can quickly look at who connected last, and who's done the last approvals, and who hasn't submitted their timesheet. So I'm now quickly monitoring without going through all the different views. Very proactive, making all those wheels turn within the PMO. Here's just a few other samples. I mean, I've probably got close to 100 different things to monitor. Some are little things, not important. Some are bigger, like timesheets. But I see this a lot. Project managers and status managers don't match. Anybody see that? I'm surprised. Somebody's not getting updates. What happens is some PMOs, they don't let the project manager create the project schedule. They do it, and then they reassign it to somebody as a project manager. So now you have a mismatch of status managers and project managers. Anyway, that creates a lot of heartache. If you miss deadlines, you can create a list of missed deadlines with a SQL statement, and then have an email sent out to somebody. I'm a big fanatic of status dates. If status dates aren't being updated each week, project managers aren't doing their job with the dynamic schedules to make sure they push unfinished work up. It's a good practice, and it makes your PMO more effective. And then some of these other things are just, every project manager comes in with a different skill level in managing projects. And with these queries, I can kind of find out what they're doing wrong. I mean, I have seen some good tools out there on the floor where the tools will look for this stuff. But if you have governance and standards within your PMO, you can find this for them. One thing is we don't assign resources to summary tasks. Or milestones. I mean, I think you can do it, but for the most part, it's not a great idea. But that'll skew your numbers if you start doing that. Resources is self-defining. When you create a new resource, by default, they approve their own time. So they may never know that they've been approving their own time in their timesheets because it's self-approving as the default. But I like to find those early. And once I find them, I can get that corrected right away. And then, some projects, this isn't necessarily so bad, but you built a team, you put and you want to assign people on a team to task, and some schedules have nobody assigned. I mean, that may be a good or not, but you might want to point it out to somebody. So, that's the simple, easy way of monitoring without getting involved with much technology. But you want to automate it. So now that you've got your list of things that you do manually, the second part is to automate it. And the automation isn't going to fix things. All it's going to do is send out reminders when you find things that need to be done. If you're real simple-minded and you want to just aggravate the whole company, Friday, you send out emails, turn in your timesheet. Or maybe turn in your timesheet and maybe put a reminder in your Outlook calendar to do this. Later, Monday morning, you might start being, just send out the emails to the people that haven't really submitted their timesheets or task sheets. So now you write a query to identify it and then send them an email. Now, when I send emails, I do it different ways. Sometimes I'm real polite. I'll just do a blind copy to them and let them know to submit their timesheets. I mean, when I implement project, I use the tool, and I even forget to do timesheets. In fact, I look at that list. I look at that list, and I see my name. And I go, submit my timesheet. It's done. So, and then if I feel a little bit evil, I'll send the timesheets to everybody with everybody's name in there. So everybody sees a big group of people that's haven't submitted their timesheets. I think it embarrasses them. But it doesn't embarrass them as much as if later you send out a reminder to their boss and you copy them. Now those are kind of mean ways to do it. I think the more polite way is a blind copy. And then I actually think you should send it to the PMO staff, because often if people are having issues, the PMO staff can help. And they can, give you a call or send you a text message and say, fill out your timesheet. What's the problem? I don't see tabs. Well, you got to click on the tabs and you start seeing things on the ribbon. Mostly it's a training issue. And sometimes it's a caring issue. People just don't care if they submit the timesheet. And you want to tell them you do care. It's important. And that's when you get into the evangelist. We need this information. We have to be competitive. This PMO is one way to do that, is making sure everybody's marching to the same beat of the project. That make sense? Yeah, we're quiet. Putting you to sleep quick. Okay, so how do you monitor it? There's different ways. For you technical people, you probably know that you can use the window scheduler to schedule things. It's not a good way of doing it, but you can do it using PowerShell or some other scripts. I don't like it because it just doesn't seem to be enough. The other way is you could use a SQL Server agent and schedule a job. That works pretty good. But then you have to get the SQL people involved, and they may snap at you. So, but it's a good way to to get these processes and emails sent using some of those SQL statements. Probably the better way is a SQL Server reporting service. You can set up subscriptions, and in the subscription, some of these queries that I created, you can have the queries be generated and sent to the person who needs to get the email. Or snapshots. We talked about snapshots, where you take a historical record of where the project was. We'll talk more about this in a little bit. But the snapshot, you're going to basically select all the tasks and maybe capture what the number of hours are and the cost, and some just general information that the PMO finds important. But now you put it in a spreadsheet in your subscription, and every week or month you've got a huge spreadsheet with a historical mapping of where the project was. So, 6 months from now you can go back to that spreadsheet and kind of figure out what was going on. And then my favorite, which requires more work, but it does a whole lot more for you, is the SQL Server Integrated Services. And basically what you can do with that is you can grab stuff and like a list of people, and then maybe send an individual email to them indicating what's going on, or a reminder. It's a good way of doing it, and most SQL people know how to do this, and that's the way I would recommend doing it for the automation. So I talked a little bit about dashboards. Now I'm going to go through some dashboards, and these are just really for the PMO to make sure they're on track, the executives. And you want to measure growth and trends. So I got some examples of what you'd have in a dashboard. Like this one right here, let's assume they want to get the PMO running in 9 months. What you see is a steady increase of new people being put on the system, and then it kind of flattens out, indicating they've got everybody that they're going to have in the PMO, the resources. It just shows you something is happening versus having nothing to look at to see how well the growth of the PMO is. Eventually, it should top out. And in this other one, it's based resources to employees. Again, you can kind of see it's growing as more and more people are using a project server, and then it kind of flattens out. And that top half is usually executive management. That they're not going to be so much entering stuff into the project server, but or they may be other people. I mean, I've never seen it at 100%, but I do see it getting close to it. These are some other things that I might track. Resources not logged in. That blue line shows the resources that are getting accounts and coming into the PMO under Project Server. And then I got a small line where people are not logging in regularly. And that it shouldn't spike. I mean, often it's new people coming on board, and they just have to be trained and told what to do in the PMO. Let's see. Is that a laser? That's not good. So, where's the laser pointer on that? Do you know? Okay, thank you. Never mind. Okay. This timesheet reminder, again, this shows resources, and then I put a little bar, show how many people had to be reminded the first time at maybe 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock, and then at 10 o'clock. And you can see it's dropping as the day goes on. Status updates, the same kind of things. It just gives you a feed, some feedback on how the wheels are turning within the PMO. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Projects not published. I mean, this should be really flat line. Every week, people should be publishing their project. They should be getting updates and putting them out, saying, you know, this is what we're going to do next week. And go ahead.
These dashboards, you're creating them off of like SQL query data that you store in Excel, or is it directly out of the project database?
Into Excel. Yeah. You could create another database to record or capture this, but you have to capture it, and it's not stored in them. Good question. His question was this data being all captured out of the database? But no, it's not. You have to get the data and then store it somewhere, either an Excel spreadsheet or a database, so you can generate these reports. I do the same thing for phase gates, showing how many new projects came in, how many projects got executed, how many were closed. And then here's one we're going to talk a little bit later. It's a conformance index. And these just show how many projects that are currently running. And then you're seeing this, what I call a weak index. That just indicates the project managers aren't doing enough to make that schedule meet the governance of their PMO. But I'm seeing a trend where it's going down because often project managers have to be trained and told what the standards are. And then I do the same thing for the resources. Resources are coming in. This shows that these resources are less than 50% utilized. As a resource manager, you might want to get that lower or higher or whatever your governance says. So now, at this point, that's all I wanted to tell you. But I've got more. Okay, you got any questions?
I have a question about the unpublished projects.
Okay.
How are you determining that, what's unpublished?
I can't recall right off the top of my head. It seems like there's a published date.
Are you having to look at the saved and published database, or are you somehow getting that?
I'll be looking at the project, the published database.
Published database.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Even though that schema's not doesn't have a schema for the published database, but you're going into reporting out of that one.
I do report out of the published database. There's a lot of data in there, and a lot of timesheet data that I have discovered. In fact, we're going to be talking about it. Like timesheet data, a lot of the timesheet data is still in the published because there is no publishing with timesheets. It's a different cycle. What's that? See, well, it's in separate database and separate tables. Those are good questions.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my IT department to open it up for me, and they're hesitant, so I need to get some ammunition.
Well, yeah, and I don't think Microsoft really approves coming out of the publish, but for me, I had to go in there. In fact, we're going to see some of the stuff I had to go to the publish to get. So this is one cycle. Resources submit time. So then I'll have some process to look for missing timesheets and task sheets. Then the manager approves. So I go through a cycle of what I try to do is have like everybody gets their timesheets in by noon. Resource managers, project managers get their timesheets approved by Tuesday morning. The governance has to define when things happen and have a time and date. Mondays at 10, Tuesdays at 8. And if you miss it, you miss it. But you want everybody marching to that same beat of these cycles. So, and that's what I have here. Monday, get all this stuff in by noon. Tuesday, make sure the status and timesheets get updated. Wednesday, check status dates, make sure they're published. So I just send them those friendly, don't forget. And it's usually emails. I try to shorten that cycle. I can't seem to shorten it. I mean, it just, it just can't be shortened. But maybe with the right force, you could get that done. Here's a query that I built to look at the status. You got the project status. In fact, you got 2 approvals. I mean, if you're using single mode, and every company's different, you may only need half of this. But if you're doing statusing, you can see if it's been approved or not. If you're doing timesheets, you can see if that's been approved or not. This timesheet status is coming out of the published database. And I looked and did all kind of queries, and I cannot find it. But I do know when I go out of the published database, I see that, and it matches what I'm seeing when I do delegation. I'll get the timesheet manager. So if I get a list that's still in process, I can send them an email. These are just the different statuses. Some other things I look for is missing data. Question?
Hi, yeah, on the screen back one, are those permissions set up in like resource? I mean, I'm just curious about like the resource name and the timesheet manager, and that people can approve their own work. That seems like a conflict of interest.
It is if it's
Well, I'm just wondering. I see it here. I'm just wondering is that set up in the system somewhere that you would monitor and make sure that you don't have that before you even get to monitoring it?
That would be one of the things I monitor. In fact, that's what I talked about earlier about self-approving.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I didn't expect to see this in here.
This is not real data.
So this isn't right.
Yeah, I mean, like these periods, these would all be the same period. I'd be looking at the same.
No, I know the periods. I was just wondering about the resource name and the timesheet manager.
Yeah, this is not from a real system. Yeah.
Got it.
But this is the kind of stuff that I pull
Right.
from clients. I didn't want to put my clients,
No, I'm
so
cool with that.
I try to protect the innocent.
Yeah. And, just another question that's kind of
Uh-huh.
just related in general to the scope of this
Right.
presentation, and maybe I didn't understand it. Are you talking at all about compliance with, like in the SharePoint site, for any kind of required documentation that, like artifacts that a project has to approve, and how to monitor for that? Or is this strictly around schedule?
Well, earlier I mentioned project workspaces. You can write these same queries, maybe not through the project server database, but through the SharePoint content databases, and look for documents.
Right. I was just wondering, are we talking about that, or is your scope limited to schedule monitoring?
In this session, I'm speaking mostly on schedules,
Okay.
but it's not just schedules. I mean, I only have so much time.
No,
Right. And those same queries could be written to make sure documents are approved, or all the documents that go with the project. In other places I've been, they had a QA person that would physically look, and you could write a query and have that done a lot faster and more accurate. So, yes, it can be done. It should be done. I don't cover those queries in this particular. Someone has another question? How many resources? Typical is 300 to 400, but some sites it's over 2,000. How do you what?
How are you constantly doing this? So you got 2 levels of approval, right? You got the timesheet manager and the status manager, right? Right, you got 2 levels, right?
Yeah.
So you're telling you're sending out all these emails, so you could have approval by the timesheet manager, not the status manager. You could have
Right.
it's a nightmare.
That's why it needs to be automated. Because when I was
Automated emails.
automated emails,
You know what happens with that? People ignore them. After a while, so many emails, and
That-
they're flashing these emails out there, just out another email.
they do ignore them until you CC their manager, and that seems to get it moving more. It's a PMO. I know what you're saying, and I agree with you. But part of the PMO's governance is to make sure all this is occurring. And it's through the automation that you can help get that done. Now, when I do it manually, I don't. If it's 2,000 people, I can't do it. But small shops. But even now, I don't do it manually. Everything I do is with a spreadsheet.
And what about your hours? They get a total of 40 hours, right?
That could be another governance.
That's another problem. People putting more than 40, less than 40.
And that. Go ahead. I agree. And again, that's governance on where you can write a query, and if it's over 40 hours, have it corrected. It's all based on governance, on what the governance has said.
Yeah, the key we were thinking about actually putting a script at the time they submit their time card to do a validation on the time card.
Mm-hmm.
So over 40 in regular, don't even let them go through. Under, just stop it there.
Right.
It will save a lot of problems for the PMO.
And you can put limits in the server settings.
It doesn't work. You mean limits by what way? 40 hours? So just 40?
You can say report 40. You can, but I think this is a better solution. Is sending an email saying you went over 40. Can you adjust it? Can you justify it? Because I know that every case is different. Someone says, "Well, I just worked 60 hours this week because I'm catching up for last week." So. Anyway, so this is other things I look at is missing data in the project. What time we have? Excuse me? 20 more minutes. Okay, good. Oh, we're right where I want to be. Looking for missing deadlines. If the governance requires deadlines, I'm a big proponent. If you have milestones, key milestones, you have deadlines associated with it, and you have a report that spits that out. Missing documents in workspaces, which was answering your question. Missing documents in workspaces. Or maybe missing approvals. This is just a view where I create it and I can easily see the different phase gates. This is that manual process. So the views can do a lot for you. Snapshots, some companies, they'll do a project summary by hours and by phase gates. However the governance wants to keep a snapshot, you decide that and you create a query and you run it and save it in a spreadsheet. Or if you really do it right, you'll save it in another database, so then you don't have to join a bunch of spreadsheets. You can run queries for this historical snapshots. I also monitor the resource profile. I look for missing data, data that's not properly defined, resources that are in the wrong security group. Sometimes people say I don't see timesheets because for some reason the security group team member got dropped for whatever reason. And again, I look for missing data with views at first, and then over time I look for missing data for those critical fields, and it's usually new employees or people leaving, making sure that, the processes are in place to get rid of the inactive. And I do the same thing for resource data. I do snapshots of it. I like to see what happened a month from now or a week from now. Now this next one, this is written about in the PMBOK. They call it a conformance index. And they have probably 50 or 80 pages on things that you can measure a schedule to make sure it meets some kind of conformance. I put together what I think's good, but every PMO will have what they need. Often there's phases in a project schedule. And if you've got phases, you want to make sure they still exist in there. Because sometimes a new project manager goes, I don't need that, and they delete it. And if they do, you want some kind of query say, put that thing back in there. We're using that to measure that against all the other projects. missing dates, unassigned resources, all the things I talked about that should be in a schedule. So the way I design it, I look for best practices, bad practices, and I try to put an index between 0 and 100. And this is just kind of an example of some of the things I might put in my conformance index. And what this is what I'm looking for, and I come up with a weight, and everybody does it differently. If a project schedule's over 2 years, some clients, they don't have anything over a year. I mean, they do the same thing over and over again. So I might add points or take points if it's a long schedule. Maybe it's a schedule that goes 10 years, and you know for the fact that it shouldn't go over 3 or 4. So I look for different things, milestones. Maybe you have 7 key milestones that should be in there. Some people put milestones everywhere. If you don't want that in your governance, or if your governance says we don't want that many milestones, you just put something in here, look for it, and assign a weight to it. Task count is less than 20. New project manager, he's real simple. He just writes a few tasks or deliverables in his project schedule. Might be all you need. Might not be enough detail. My favorite is this. Task is over 500 lines. I see these huge schedules. I don't know how you manage them. Often when I see huge schedules, I see somebody working full-time managing it. And if you're working on it full-time, that's okay. But if you're working on 5 or 6 schedules and you also have to get out in the field and do all kind of other stuff, a lot of tasks might be... Details the number one killer of a successful implementation of Project Server. Anyway, so maybe 500's a little low. You might ding it up to 1,000. But you have to think about what is, for your environment, where is that sweet spot of too much detail versus enough? Planned hours, task names less than 7 characters. I mean, these are just little minor things, but I'm creating some kind of a standard, and I'm getting all the project managers to think about a standard. And if you only got 1 or 2 project managers, this may be a moot point. But if you're trying to corral, 20 or 30 or 100 project managers, you want some kind of standard to make sure everybody's doing this right. Anyway, so that would be all written up in a SQL statement. I'd come up with a score, and then I'd put those scores in the project center. And what this is showing, this red, these are probably new project managers or project managers that don't understand all the concepts of good project schedules. And so there's a lot of them. So now you're looking at some training issues. You want to do some coaching to make sure everybody's on board on what should be included in a good project schedule. And in this case, it's going down. And then this light green is just kind of a medium. They're not real bad, but they're not real good. It's these that I'm interested in. These are good project schedules that have met the conformance index of your PMO. I get these guys to coach these guys. You have the good ones if they'll do it, but I think most good project schedulers like to share their information and take people under the wing. So if not, that's what your PMO is for. They should be providing some of this training and to help with the governance of the schedule. So this is not in the PMBOK. This is mine. It's Resource Conformance Index. I think you can do the same thing with resources. Make sure resources meet certain best practices. Not as quite as defined. Maybe I've got some missing data. Resources without assignments. Why do you have a resource if they don't have assignments? That would be the resource manager might be doing a poor job, or the project managers don't know these resources are available. So if they're over allocated this month or way over allocated next month, you can come up with a score. And I do the same thing. I kind of weigh it, see what it looks like. So, putting it all together, look for the big hits. Start some kind of manual monitoring. You really identify someone to do this in your group. Actually, once you lay it out, you could just have an intern come in here and look at this stuff and send out emails. But putting the plan together is the first. And then automate it. Automation is the key. This thing is so big, there's so many wheels, there's so much missing data, there's so much data, there's so much governance, one person can't do it all and can't remember it all. You build queries and automate it, and then things start running smooth within your PMO. Build dashboards, trends. Again, you're doing the trends of the PMO. So when to start? I say you start now. You can do this during pilot, deployment, each phase, because you're getting those wheels greased. And as you put more and more people in it, you want those wheels greased, and as more people come in, it's smooth. And you're not constantly looking at why things aren't working, because you're proactively finding things that need to be fixed. So any questions? Alex. How do you create snapshots? That's a good question. I write a query on the fields that I want, and in the SQL Server reporting services, you can create a subscription to generate a report, and that report, the format is going to be Excel. So you just have that kick off every week or month or wherever. If you do it, if you take it one step further, I would use SSIS to really do more data pulling and pushing, and maybe push it into a database. That's my preferred way. Any other questions? Very good question. If not, we're going to have a drawing. I know y'all stayed up. Question?
What technologies have you found are the best for generating your automated emails? So one of the challenges, so we've got lots and lots of data. You can do lots of personalized emails. The most effective ones are where you're getting an email that has got data in it relating to you.
Right.
How do you automatically generate those?
That's a good question. How do you automate email that's specific for a person? And that's why you need to use SSIS, the System Integrated Services, because then you can pull that data in, pull that email out, put a message specific for that one user. But you have to put intelligence into the query and the pulling of data. The reporting services isn't going to be, it's not going to have that intelligence. So SSIS is where you'll have to build that into it. Does that make sense? Okay.
A couple of comments. As far as actual hours,
Uh-huh.
the 40 hours, the way we settle on that is we want them to enter actual hours, and then we create another set of tables where we normalize the hours to their normal work hours.
Okay.
That way they can just put in what they actually work, and then we can scale it for the finance guys for their capitalization and chargeback purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Another comment was, this year we finally got an across-the-board goal for everybody in information systems, just where I am,
Right.
as a compliance goal to do their timesheets at a certain level of performance.
Okay.
They get part of their yearly evaluations, and that really got their attention.
Good. Well, thank you. That's a good idea. Any other comments or questions? If not, I'm going to do the giveaway. Any more people want to put their business card if you came in late? And I think we can get Eric to sign this.
It's a good chance.
There's a good chance. And Donna has graciously agreed to pull the winning rabbit out of the hat. You want to shake it up? Donna, can you? Let's all hear it. Give it Donna applause.
There's a drink ticket in here as well.
There's what?
There's a drink ticket in there.
Oh, there's a drink ticket. Can you read that to me? I don't have my glasses on.
Steve Pierce.
Steve Pierce. Oh, congratulations, Steve. You have to come up and get it. Do you have a pen to sign it?
Yeah.
If you don't have any other questions, I'll be around. Oh, fill out your evaluation. Really appreciate it, and thank you for coming. Bravo.